Hey, welcome back once again, everyone, to the Week 7 Fantasy Football Preview Edition of the Football Goons podcast. Hopefully, you had an enjoyable weekend in Week 6. And if not, well, there's always next week for people like me. Which brings us, ultimately to the reason why we're here, to give you a full breakdown of the week ahead in fantasy football. We're going to talk about some waiver players and what you can kind of expect from them. Discuss a couple of names that are trending right now, and then just some general fantasy trends as well. I'm sure we'll go off the rails a time or two, as you can probably see if you're watching live on YouTube. We've kind of already gone there with at least one of these goons, but we always like to start things off with a little.
Miles. It's Miles.
Yeah,
I was gonna say it's Steele's hipster hat.
It's usually me.
It's not like Safari Rocco over there. So, listen, the NBA season tipped off tonight. So I'm going to ask this question, just general discussion to throw out there. Your favorite NBA player of all time and why?
Allen Iverson.
Yeah, by a lot.
Go to the punch.
Yeah, I hate you for that.
I mean, it's hard on a sport like that. I mean, I'm coming around to basketball the last 5 or 6 years as far as league wide. But back then, I was only paying attention to the Sixers. So the best player on my favorite team is going to lend itself to, not to mention he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, it's not like Rocco like an Allen Houston or something. But, the guy's a Hall of Fame player.
Who did he say the other day? Who did he say the other day when we were asking what your favorite Knicks were?
I don't know.
Oh, no. He got mad because I had David Lee in my top 10 favorite.
David Lee. But I'm kidding.
He's probably going to throw John Starks at us or something.
Yeah.
Listen, if I was going to pick a guy for my legitimate favorite team, it would probably be Patrick Ewing. But actually, my favorite guy that I like that I've watched, and the three of you will know this and attest to this. Back in the day, that early 2000 4-5 Dwayne Wade, he was just electrifying to watch. I enjoyed watching him play basketball.
Yep.
This is going to sound terrible as a Sixers fan, but you got to remember the reason why I kind of started liking this guy was early on. I'm going with Kevin Garnett. I was always a big KG fan.
I'm fine with that.
He basically had everything that I wished I did.
Athleticism,
the good looks.
No, I mean, I definitely have him beat in the looks department. I definitely got him beat in the looks department because he's got an angry mug. But he's a good trash talker. He could back it up. He could play multiple positions. So, I always liked KG. I was sad because I would stay up late a lot of times and watch like T-Wolves games and like just be dragging in school just to watch KG, and it just felt like they wasted all of his best years there. So
now I know you're a liar because they didn't show T-Wolves games on television back then.
Sure they did.
Yeah, with Garnett and Stephon Marbury. Oh yeah.
T-Wolves Lakers, T-Wolves Kings, like those were great rivalries those couple years.
Mine's Iverson by a lot. Nobody's even close. And the biggest reason I started, obviously because I'm a Sixers fan, but the biggest reason I started watching him and liking him is because he's always the smallest guy. And I had that in common with him because I've been the smallest guy on every team, including most co-ed teams I've been on. So it's just, so I related in that. And just the way he's pound for pound the best of all time.
All right, well, listen, let's get into some fantasy football talk. As fun as it is to kind of talk about all-time favorites, we'll talk about some waiver players here. And we're not going to dig too far into too many players here because we're going to look at the trending of some of those players more so. Let's talk about Marlon Mack. He's 25% owned. Obviously he had a decent week last week, 12 carries for 89 yards. He seems like he's finally healthy. Again, it's this typical situation with the Colts. Is he finally the guy in the backfield there, whatever? So I throw out the question to you here. What can you expect out of Marlon Mack, and what level of interest do you have in him?
I mean, I would hope that he can take the job and run with it. We'll see what the coaching staff wants to do. I mean, you always have to look at the coaching tree, and Frank Reich is not coming from a place where he's used to a bell cow back. He came from Philadelphia that shared carries. So that could be part of the philosophy there. But what does bode well for Marlon Mack is that during his absence and the frustration of his injury, Jordan Wilkins definitely didn't take the job and run with it. Nyheim Hines looked good in stretches and spurts, but he didn't take the job either. So if Mack's going to come in, I mean, this is the best running back game they've had to this point if you discount receiving touchdowns for Hines. So it's there to be taken. We'll see if he continues this and if Frank Reich wants him to continue it. But, it's a situation where 25% owned feels quite a bit low to me, though. Yeah. It should definitely change tomorrow.
This has like a classic situation about it. Sorry to cut you off there, Spurrier. This has kind of like
holding on to that one.
No, I just thought about it real quick. I couldn't think of who it looked like with that hat on. It just has like that kind of situation that fantasy players love, where at this point in the season, where also you scooping up a guy who, is probably going to be the volume lead, barring some kind of injury. So, it almost feels like if you've got a spot for him, you've got to throw him on your roster at the very least. I don't know that I'm going to plug him in and play him right away, but this is a guy who's technically the starting running back week 7 that you could scoop up in 75% of leagues.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say that my only problem with Marlon Mack or he's clearly seems like he's going to take over the backfield because the other two didn't do anything with their job. My biggest problem with owning any Indianapolis Colts running back is the amount that they're throwing the ball because they're down, because they're behind. I mean, it's nice to I can't see a situation where they're going to be up in a game with a good solid lead where they can run out the clock and have him get some garbage time yards. So it's all early and then they're throwing because they're behind. No offense, Steele. Sorry to say it, but it's the way it's been so far this year. So not that I wouldn't own him or roster him because I think he's the best of the three. I mean, we've all thought that all along. He just couldn't get on the field. But now that he's healthy, it's like how much is he actually going to be able to contribute in the running game if they're always playing from behind and Andrew Luck is dropping back 45, 50 times a game.
Up to 60. Yeah, as you'll see in our GGD, our Goons, Ghosts, and Daily article we have coming out tomorrow morning. I love Mac, at least this week. I think he's a solid flyer from here on out, and they're not going to become the ground and pound elite team, but they have to at least get a little more balanced, I think. They can't let Luck pass 55 times a game. It's just not going to work. So I think he offers that option for them to come back to being at least a little more balanced.
Yeah, no, and you say, you don't envision too many games where they're kind of securing a lead late. This week might be one, at least on paper.
And they realistically, outside the last 2 weeks, or even last week, they've been in every game. It's not like they're getting blown out. So.
Right. So just kind of a last thought on this, and this is just an in general thing, but low mileage on Marlon Mack. So is that something that you prefer, or is that more telling of maybe he can't be that 20 carry guy?
I don't think you need him to be a 20 carry guy at this point. I mean, scoring from time to time, is 12 to 15 carries. Not 89 yards is a bit much to expect out of that, but you give me 12.
You can get a couple more catches too.
Yeah, you give me 12 for 65 and now maybe 2 catches for 15 and score every other week. I mean, that's great for where you're playing him. You're not signing him up to be your RB1 20 carries. This is a bye-week flex option. If you put 11 points out there, you're juiced about that.
Yeah.
All right. How about Marquise Goodwin? He's 43% owned, obviously with the 49ers now. I think a lot of us expected a dip in play with the 49ers, and maybe it's coming. I don't know. Maybe that's something that we'll get to here. But he's a very, big play or bust kind of guy, it seems, at least when it comes to scoring. But he's the prime target right now in San Francisco. So is this a guy who's appealing to you as a fantasy owner? He's
extremely appealing to me. I like him just as much now. I mean, let's be honest. The only reason he's 43% owned is because he himself was injured. If he was there the whole time with Jimmy and now with CJ, I actually think he's just as valuable now because they have to hit those home runs in order to stay competitive with games. Like he hit CJ to him last night twice was the reason why they were ahead in that game. I mean, and then we saw Aaron Rodgers magic, which, unfortunately sometimes you just can't stop. But the big playability for him is what kept them ahead in that game for most of the game. He had a phenomenal game. So I like him just as much now because they're gonna need that dynamic. And let's be honest, sometimes you just can't cover 4.27 speed. Like you just can't.
All right, let's talk about just an interesting name here. Just more so because of the news today with Devontae Freeman going on the IR. He may be eligible to return some point later in this season. Based on some of the stuff that I've kind of seen out there from some doctors who are chiming in, they're saying it's pretty unlikely at this point for regular season at the very least. So Ito Smith now becomes a much more popular name as a Falcons running back. He's 11% owned. He's now the clear backup to Tevin Coleman, but Smith was already, putting up some stats here and there through the first couple weeks of the year. So how much more appealing does Ito Smith appear to you guys now?
Yeah, actually, today's news certainly changes things. I mean, you sent this agenda out, and I had written, I'm not overly interested because eventually Freeman's going to come back, and he's going to really be relegated to a definite third role. And then, we get the news about Freeman, so I had to change what I said. Now I'm definitely interested in Ito Smith because he's basically the Tevin Coleman role from the past. He's getting about 45% snap share here. During Dan Quinn's press conference today, definitely came out in support of Ito Smith, saying, because the question was actually about, is Tevin Coleman ready for the expanded role? And he said, well, Ito's ready for third and even second down, and there's nothing we have to change play calling wise when he's in there. The guy's scored 3 consecutive weeks, so he's got a nose for the end zone here. I mean, he's got to be owned now. He's got to be owned and maybe played. Like, if you were the type that played Tevin Coleman, it doesn't make any sense to me to not be the type that plays Ito Smith.
It's interesting to me because I think we all thought that they were a 2-back system because the 2 backs are really good. Maybe they're a 2-back system because they're a 2-back system. Not to take away from Freeman and Coleman because they are very good backs when they're in there and healthy, but maybe this is just the way they want to run it.
Yeah, and something interesting too that I kind of looked at here. Coleman hasn't really run away with that role, even in these weeks that he's had the opportunity. I think I saw today he's averaging like 3.2 yards per carry or something to this point. Ito Smith isn't averaging that much more. I think he's actually the exact same at this point. But this is an opportunity where, they know Tevin Coleman is probably going to be a free agent. So I'm interested because I think Ito Smith might be more of a long-term play for them, and they might want to get more of a look out of him. You know what you have with Coleman, and you know that he's not necessarily your future. And while you do have to lean on him a good amount, if Ito Smith shows out a little bit, you might have a tendency to kind of jump to him a little more.
Or they find out if Ito Smith and Tevin Coleman can be their future together, like that combination instead of the Freeman Coleman combination.
It's going to be tough to get out of that Freeman contract, but
yeah,
your point's made.
Yeah. All right. So another player that we're interested in here is OJ Howard. I know OJ Howard was banged up. So, the 34% ownership is probably that's the biggest reason at this point. How is OJ Howard not going to be, a 90+ ownership after this week? Explain this to me. I just don't understand.
I mean, he has to be after this week. I think mostly it's been injury scare and Cam Brayton. For some reason, Anthony Auclair is still playing 26% of snaps, which is really high considering they have those two guys. I know he's the blocking tight end, but they have so many wide receiver weapons and really no running game. So there's no reason for a blocking tight end to be on the field 26% of the time. So I think a lot of that now goes to OJ Howard as he's fully healthy. And I think it will skyrocket now with 4 bye weeks this week, 4 next week, 6 the following, and he's already had his bye. So I think it gets, mid-90s% owned this week.
Yeah, I'm chalking that number up to the week 5 bye, followed by no one thought he was going to play this week.
Yeah.
So he wasn't getting claimed coming out of his bye even. So essentially most of the fantasy world thought it was 2 weeks in between games. So I'm not surprised by the number, but you're right. It's tight end's just such a dumpster fire across the league as far as fantasy purposes. He shouldn't just be owned. He's likely started in most leagues going forward every week.
I just kind of look at it from the perspective of like nobody peppers the tight end as much as Jameis. So they get in the red zone, like you kind of know, all right, there's a 50-50 chance that it's going to be Cam Brate or OJ Howard. Like it's just that's just how it is in Tampa Bay right now. That the running attack, hasn't really materialized for them yet. The coverage attention tends to go towards Mike Evans, so it opens up opportunities for them. So I just feel like you really can't lose between the two of them because, as I said, there's a 50-50 shot that one of them is getting a touchdown every single week. So for the tight end position, those odds are pretty good. So, all right, let's talk about Christian Kirk quickly here too. He's 41% owned. We talked about him briefly last week as well. But now the name is kind of jumping off the page a little bit more because he's emerging as the top target in Arizona. But is that enough to make him ownable at this point? Because, Arizona still does have its struggles.
I think so. I mean, I guess just Josh Rosen seems to really like him, and he's a big play threat on top of that. So I expect the targets to kind of increase on top of, we joked just last week, well, you can't score from 75 yards out every week. Well, no, but I don't need him to if he's also getting 7 targets. And every once in a while, it takes one for 75. So, I think ultimately we all love Larry Fitz, but I do think what we could be seeing here is a quarterback that's smart enough to know, listen, we're going to bust our butt every week. This year's not going anywhere. So I need to develop my chemistry with Christian Kirk, not Larry Fitzgerald, because I'm going to be with Christian Kirk for at least the next 4 years. So as games get out of hand, I think we might actually see Kirk's targets get forced, definitely over Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the chemistry has already been being built. I mean, these two came in as rookies together. So they did rookie training camp together. They did, OTAs together. Then they did training camp together. Like, and honestly, I always like to go by this. I think that like when you're a rookie quarterback or you're a second string quarterback at the start of the season and you're getting first team reps, but also second team reps, you develop chemistry with those second team wide receivers that are there to start. That then when you are inserted into lineup, those second stringers that have been playing with you all preseason, all off season, those are kind of guys that you are going to throw to maybe above your number one wide receiver. Not that anything in Arizona has really gone according to plan at this point.
So just maybe like a 10-second answer on this. Do you think that a little bit of this too is that we're kind of seeing Larry Fitzgerald finally take that slow step down a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I mean, what else can you attribute it to? I mean, their offense is terrible, but he's also been banged up, which takes longer to heal when you're older. Like if I get a hangnail, like I'm planning on being on my couch for a solid week. So this guy's, is play a solid week, and by a solid week I mean 3 to 4. So he's older than all of us and playing in the NFL. So yeah, I think it is the beginning of the end. But will I be surprised if he comes out in a couple weeks and puts up 17 catches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns? I'll be like, yeah, that sounds right.
No, I'd be surprised.
It will be all of their catches and all of their yards and all of their touchdowns for maybe 4 or 5 weeks.
I just got a really fun podcast idea. During the offseason, we should do a podcast and just figure out all the teams where everybody is younger than Miles.
Come on.
I like it. So come on.
It's my favorite thing to do. I do that for fun at home, so I'll definitely talk about it for an hour on podcast.
In fairness, we did that one night after pod, and it did not go well. We were all very depressed.
And that was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We gotta count one head coach, and
don't worry, Vinatieri's still going. So
yeah. I'm still good with the Colts.
Back to Christian Kirk real quick, though. I said last week he was averaging about 38 snaps per game. This past week, it actually went up to 51 snaps. So I love that in his favor. If he can stay around that 8 target mark, I think he'll be productive from here on out. But I'd love to see him to get up, get around 10 targets a game. But I think I think he can be pretty high end, and he's going to be a steal that's going to be on a lot of championship teams if he can get around 10 targets. I mean, he's catching 75.8% right now, so he's catching most of his balls. So, which that matters, Rocco, in case you didn't know.
I'm fully aware.
All right, gotcha.
No, well, and not to mention that the more that he gets involved, the more opportunity he's going to have to be on the field. Listen, if their receiving core stinks and they can't, prolong drives and get third down conversions. No, I know, but I'm saying if they can't prolong drives, they can't get third down conversions, they're not going to run enough plays for him to get that much burn. If he's productive and they can get first downs and move the chains, obviously he's going to be on the field more.
Right, and he's a part of that.
Yeah,
he needs to be
he's probably going to be the biggest part of that receiving game.
Right.
All right, well, guys, let's take a second here and talk about our friends at Gorb, and that's GHORBH. If you watch our live YouTube show every single week, then you see that, we've got these nice sponsorships behind us. So you might think, oh, these guys are just pumping this sponsorship because, they paid for, a nice ad time and a backdrop and whatever. And while, some of that's probably obviously true, you also notice that we also wear the gear. And it's because we like it. We feel good in it. It looks good. And it gives us a reminder that in life, you've only got two choices. You can either get hungry or be hungry. And that's what Gorb's main message is all about. Finding those things that fuel you and that you're passionate about and getting hungry and getting after them instead of being hungry and wishing that you did. Check them out at gorb.com. They've got all kinds of great styles, designs, colors, for men, for women, for kids, shirts, t-shirts, long sleeve. They've got hoodies. It's hoodie season, which is one of my favorite things. Gorb.com, GHORBH.com. Check it out today. All right, guys, you guys know me well, so you're probably not surprised by this. Some of our listenership and live audience here might not know me as well, but I'm a very creative person, and I'm also very hip.
Oh,
that's why. The next,
why are you lying to the people?
The next segment,
over 2, my friend, over 2.
The Goon Squad doesn't deserve that, man.
You literally said hip.
I am very hip. All right. So the next segment is properly entitled "This Is Why I'm Hot," and we're going to talk about some players who have broke out.
Wait. He's referencing the fact that he's quote unquote hip by referencing a song that's like 10 years old.
Hey. You just settle your tea kettle there, Spurrier.
Listen to it on your boombox.
I'm actually going to listen to it on my Talkboy. All right, so let's look at some.
I don't even know what that is.
You remember the playback thing from Home Alone, the little cassette player thing with the microphone?
You're so hip, South.
I still have a Talkboy. It still works.
You're so hip.
All right, let's talk about some players who broke out over the past couple games and discuss whether or not we think that this is sustainable or, legit in our terms, or we think it's just more of a flash in the pan kind of thing. The first name on the docket here is Chester Rogers. Don't be laughing at how hip I am, all right? He's got 3 straight weeks of flex relevance. With T.Y. Hilton still hurt, basically the Colts wide receivers are like a mash unit. I'm pretty sure they're going to call one of us to come and play. Chester Rogers, is this legit and sustainable, or is it just kind of a flash in the pan thing?
I'm out.
Wow, really?
I'm out once Ty comes back. I'll just say it like that.
I think he gets better when Ty comes back. I think he I talked a little bit about it last week with he and Ryan Grant. I think they both improve. Now, I said that I hope Marlon Mack makes them more balanced. They're still going to throw 40, 45 times minimum a game. So, like I said, Ebron can only get 35 of those targets. So some of them have to go to one of these guys. And Chester has been producing. So I think that Andy has shown in the past he'll throw to anybody, but he definitely begins to trust people more and then target them more.
3 straight weeks of double-digit targets. So,
yeah,
yes, part of that's TY, but my point is that Ryan Grant has like 5. So they came into the season with Ryan Grant as the opposing starter, and when they're in 21 personnel or whatever, he's the other receiver. I think that's Chester Rogers now. Andrew, trust matters so much, and he just trusts Chester Rogers more.
I think you trust Chester Rogers, but like I think that has to do with the fact of, and this goes back to what Deal said last week, the roles that they play on the field. Like Chester plays more like TY. So when TY is on the field, you have Grant to complement him in this exact same role, and Chester slides down to a third wide receiver and really like a fourth option because Ebron is getting wide receiver 2 volume at this point. I just think that right now with TY out, obviously it's a good play. I won't take anything away from him there. But once TY comes back, I'm afraid he slides to 4.
Yeah, I don't know about that. There's something to be said for the chemistry that they're building here. Like last week, his catch rate was not great. It was 40%. But basically every other week before that, like let's go down the line here. 100%, 50 on 4 targets, 72. Like, and some of those games obviously here are on double-digit targets. So like there's a chemistry kind of being built there between he and Luck. And that second wide receiver position, or the slot even, is really still up for grabs in that offense. You know, T.Y. Hilton moves around a little bit, obviously. He's the guy, but I think there's plenty of volume to be had in that passing game, especially at the rate that they're passing the ball right now, like NFL record levels.
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't really have a slot type guy on the roster, but
right. All right, let's talk about Peyton Barber for a second here. He came out of the bye and took the lion's share of the carries last weekend. Went for 84 yards. More surprisingly, though, he had a couple, big receptions and actually took one in for a touchdown last week in the passing game, which was an element of his game that we hadn't really seen to this point. So Peyton Barber, 1 week kind of a flash in the pan thing, or do you think that this could mature into something more?
I just don't want to touch the whole situation. I mean,
that's fair.
Would I
100% fair.
Would I take him over Ronald Jones right now? Yeah, right now. But I'm like struggling over words. The whole situation, the whole way they're coaching, the whole way they're treating their team, I just don't want to be a part of it. Like I don't trust Dirk Cutter at all.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but there is kind of something to be said for the fact that like they still are trying to force the run. They want to try and maintain some kind of balance for as proficient as they've been, in the passing attack this year. 13 carries is only 13 carries, whatever. But the most promising thing, and I wrote about this just in a snippet in our Goons Ghost and Daily article live tomorrow, footballgoons.com. Their blocking scheme improved a lot coming out of the bye. Like they actually opened up some lanes where they ripped off some nice chunk plays in the running attack last week, which we hadn't seen from them in like 2 years. So, maybe it's just like a 1 week thing, a matchup kind of thing, with Atlanta, but I don't know. I just feel like that was promising to see them ripping off a couple big plays and actually getting physical in the running attack. All right, let's talk about Taylor Gabriel. He's gone for 100 plus in back-to-back games here, and the Bears offense now seems to really kind of be, hitting its stride. I don't. Obviously, they lost last weekend, but the offense has looked good. They've looked creative. They've opened up some good opportunities for some of their weapons at this point. So, Taylor Gabriel, is this a flash in the pan, or is this legit?
I think he's got to be worth the look at least. I mean, it's an explosive guy. He had his moments in Atlanta. It's not like he's a flash in the pan, never heard of him kind of guy. Like, he's a good player. Now, what his role will be, I'm not sure, but I'm leaning towards Chicago might be a good passing offense, as strange as that may sound. I mean, and I say strange, we all kind of thought it could have happened coming into the season, depending on Trubisky's, his progression. But I'm still not ready to jump in on Mitch, but I kind of want to get Gabriel now because if he goes off again this week, he's going to be the number one priority claim. So if he's low owned now and he's not owned now, and you have the bench spot where like maybe you own Ronald Jones Like, you can make that swap and then see what happens.
I have 3 priority claims with Ronald Jones involved. he's gone no matter what. If I don't get one of those guys, I'm cutting him.
I think it's odd just because it's so tough to tell, because I think we all thought that if their receiving game was going to pick up, there was going to be because of Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. So those names are hard to ignore. But at some point, we talked about this the other week, we have to start believing what we're seeing and believing what we're hearing. And if Gabriel keeps going out and putting up numbers like that, then you cannot ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually picked him up, in our main league here, just because it's kind of that Deshaun Jackson effect, but in a more efficient offense is what I'm thinking. He doesn't get a ton of targets. He's had 7 and 5 the past 2 weeks, but he's converted every one of them because they're all, low risk, just high situation where basically they can complete the pass and get him in space and let him do something, create with the ball. So anytime he touches the ball, it could go all the way. And that's an aspect that I like for fantasy, especially if I've got a spot on my bench where, I'm just holding on to somebody that's never going to see the field. Well, I might as well take a chance on this upside guy who's also involved, for what it's worth, in the running game. So, anytime he gets a handoff, he can go all the way. So, especially during bye season, with injuries and stuff right now, I think it's a good stash at this point.
Especially with 2 back-to-back 100-yard games.
Right. All right, so we're going to skip down to the last one here just because it's a similar situation. Albert Wilson had a monster week in week 6 and an offense with no real threat right now at the wide receiver position. So is this legitimately sustainable, or is this a flash in the pan in Miami?
It's both. It's a flash in the pan, but it's sustainable because you just said it. There's nobody else there that's worth it. So I don't think that Albert Wilson is actually as good as he is playing right now. But, it's kind of like when you're the best player on a bad team, your stats are going to kind of show that, Well,
he's the best after the catch receiver in the league. Just ask him.
Yeah. He'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's worth a look. I think I would take him at this point over Gabriel because I think that the volume is there. The Dolphins are going to continue to throw. I think even more so when Tannehill comes back. So if he's the option there, he's going to continue to get 8 to 10 looks a game. So I'll take that.
All right, let's talk about some reactions to some things that we've seen to this point here. And, the first one here is a little bit tough because obviously we put this agenda together. We get the news that Devontae Freeman is out. So I'll kind of cater the question, more towards Dalvin Cook. I like to talk about a player every week or players who have been extremely disappointing to this point for one reason or another. Now, we were going to talk about Freeman and Cook with, their injuries this year and talk about who we saw having more value going forward. But let's talk about Dalvin Cook, because this is a guy who, for the most part, was drafted in the first 2 rounds or first 3 at worst in a lot of drafts. So is this a situation that you feel like is going to just kind of linger all year long? He may be limited as far as what he can do to produce, or do you think that they're being a little bit more cautious with him so that he can have a little bit more of an impact when he comes back?
It's hard to say it won't linger because it's lingering.
Yeah.
It's been lingering. So, I mean, how could you stand up against it when it's all we've seen? And I honestly think the worst thing that can happen for him is if Latavius Murray plays as well as he just did.
Yeah.
The Vikings don't need any excuse to drag this out or to timeshare it when they come back. The better Lat plays. I mean, why would you come in and say, all right, hey, you've been dealing with injuries. Here's 24 touches this week.
Right.
I mean, so as a fantasy owner, it's frustrating. Not just that he's out, he's maybe in, he's out again. But now you're watching his backup make plays. So there's no guarantee that even when he is healthy, he's going to return what you paid for him.
Not to mention the fact that as they grow and get more confidence and they've played better the last couple of weeks, the passing game is ridiculous. Yeah. So they're not just because Cook's healthy, it doesn't mean they're going to go away from the passing game. Guess what? Adam Thielen's going to catch 100 yards every single week this year. All 16 weeks.
Clearly.
Dude, somebody prove me wrong. How cranky would you be if he does it, South? Oh,
I'd be pretty cranky, but the odds are on my side because like a lot of things could happen. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course, but
like you can get a bad weather game, you can get an injury. So like I'd take those odds. But I get what you're saying. Like it does look like he's at this point pretty much a lot.
So Kirk's not just going to ignore that just because Dalvin Cook is back. You know, they're not going to ignore the fact that him and Diggs are playing fantastic together.
Whatever the reasoning was, whether they're working him back, just taking it slow, or he's still injured, it doesn't matter because Lat Murray's playing well. So whatever the reason is, it's working for them. So I don't see any reason if he is actually injured that they don't work him back really slowly now, like we're thinking maybe they were doing right now. If they're starting that, start working him in, or they are working him in slowly, continue to work him in slowly and let Lat Murray have his touches.
All right, so of these two underachieving backs, which one would you buy and which one would you sell? And you have to buy one, sell one.
Okay? I think I'd still buy Howard.
Well, McCoy and Howard. I didn't
sorry.
throw them out there. No, it's fine. But I just wanted to throw it out there because I know Rocco was going to say pass. So you have to buy one, you have to sell one. McCoy and Howard.
For me, I kind of see them at the same value right now, and I'm going to pay less for Howard than I'm going to get for McCoy. Like, maybe I'll explain that better. McCoy's on back-to-back double-digit weeks here, so his value is going to be in somebody's going to see the name, see that he's played okay the last 2 weeks, and pay a little bit more for him. Nobody's paying a lot for Jordan Howard right now. There's no way. Why would you? Like I'll say I'd buy Howard, but I'm not giving you a starter for him. You're going to have to give up a starter for Shady McCoy right now because he is playing pretty well. Ultimately, I still trust Chicago's offense to be better. I still think when the weather gets worse, Jordan Howard's going to get churned in a little bit. I don't trust Buffalo to score points.
And it's so bizarre, like in Buffalo. I'm with you in your opinion, but like to see Shady coming out of the game in goal line situations and Chris Ivory running onto the field.
Like Chris Ivory, some goal line specialist.
It's just so incredibly bizarre. It's just weird. So that's why I think I would agree. I would buy on Howard. I would sell on McCoy.
I'm going to say this right now. I hope our goon listeners do not listen to me for the next 10 seconds. Jordan Howard's dead to me. Like, I was all in on Jordan Howard. I gave him all the credit in the world, and they are just going to ignore him for large chunks of this season, and it's going to frustrate you beyond belief as it's frustrating me beyond belief. In consecutive back-to-back weeks, I got 6 total points from Jordan Howard. Total.
It'll actually frustrate you enough.
That is a second-round pick, and I got 6 points total in 2 weeks.
It'll frustrate you enough that you'll wear a crocodile hunter hat on the podcast. That's how frustrating it'll be.
I'm embarrassed to show my face.
I'm frustrated by that.
Mine's obviously I'm selling Shady. You're not. I still don't think you're getting much for him, even with 2 decent weeks. I still don't think you're getting much, and I'll buy Howard.
How much?
Call me a fool, but I still believe.
How much? I'll sell them to you so cheap.
All right, I'm gonna send an offer right now.
Stop! You have to wait till later after I do.
Nope, too late.
Rock, don't accept any offers until you get all offers. All right?
No. Accept
send me your offer so we can talk about
accept the offer. Do it. Do it now. 5, 4, 3, 2. Do it now. 5, 4, 3.
Listen, one of these weeks we are gonna have a live trade happen on the air. It's destiny. It's bound to happen.
I'm working on it right now.
All right. So listen, fun question here. If we redrafted today, who would be the number 2 overall pick and why?
This was a tough one. There are certainly
really tough.
There were certainly some definite options. Ultimately, I think I'm going to go with Melvin Gordon. It's really, really tough to ignore how incredible Saquon has played. But South, you're ready. We do, however, have to always worry about the rookie wall. Now,
I love it.
Now, listen, he up and left.
Hang on.
But listen, Barkley is reportedly a workout machine. So that said, I'm not worried about the rookie wall with Saquon Barkley because of his gym ratedness. But I am worried about ultimately the Giants eventually just being so bad that even he can't succeed. I also thought a little bit about Kamara, but I am worried about what we just saw a little bit with Mark Ingram coming back. What we do see is we know Melvin Ingram's in somewhat of a timeshare, and he's still big fat doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's the number 2 back in fantasy. I don't see why he shouldn't be the number 2 pick in fantasy.
Yeah, I'll go next because I agree. Just look, they're in a timeshare, technically, in LA with the Chargers, and it hasn't mattered. Like, he's just scoring touchdowns at a ridiculous pace that, you know, we would be paying more attention to if Todd Gurley wasn't eclipsing that pace as well. But it just doesn't seem like, even for as many times as he comes off the field, that it matters. He's just, the offense is just catered completely around him.
Mm-hmm.
They give him a blow every now and then. You get Austin Eckler come in to fill up the stat sheet a little bit. But ultimately, when it comes time to cash out in the red zone, it's Melvin Gordon time every time. And he's converting at a ridiculous percentage as well. So to me, like, the touchdown is still king.
Yeah, I said Melvin. He's RB2 and he's scoring over 24.5 points per game. He's only 3 points per game behind Todd, which is pretty crazy because of what Todd's doing. So he's absolutely dominating, and he's not even being used to his fullest potential. That's the craziest part. You know where he ranks among as far as snap count goes among running backs? Have a guess.
17.
Not that bad. 11.
About 10. I would say.
He's 11th. There are 10 running backs that are on the field more than Melvin Gordon, including Buck Allen, Alfred Blue, and T.J. Yeldon. He's played 79 less snaps than Todd. He's played 95 less snaps than James Conner. So what he's doing is unbelievable.
I was going to go Melvin here, and I switched to Saquon just because Melvin has a lot around him. You literally cannot get any worse at quarterback and offensive line than Saquon has had to this point. Like, if they even get any chemistry and start to put something together, dear God, what are you going to get from Saquon Barkley? You know what I mean? So for the potential upside that Saquon can give you, if they can get a little bit, I mean, even average NFL quarterback play out of Eli Manning going forward, that makes Saquon 1,000 times better, you know, because right now he is literally all they have, and he's still at, 438 and 373 rushing, receiving with 6 touchdowns. I mean, he's right there. He's actually 30 yards behind Melvin and 100 yards ahead in receiving. You know, I'm going to jump all over that Saquon Barkley bandwagon.
All right, so these next 2 questions are about people who, to this point, have outperformed, I think, where most of us expected them, just to kind of get some perspective on what they're doing and see whether or not we feel like this is something that we need to pay more attention to. So the first one here, James White is currently sitting at running back 7 overall for the season in PPR or half PPR formats. Now, obviously, Sony Michel is emerging, you know, as the clear best pure runner in New England. He's going to start to get all the red zone carries, it seems, at this point. So how much of a drop-off do you expect with James White?
I expect quite a bit, honestly. And I know that that's probably not surprising to anybody because I'm not Mr. Receiving back guy. But, you know, you guys have already referenced the Football Goons article or Goons Ghosts and Daily Plays. Well, you're going to notice James White's my ghost this week. I just think at this point, finally, I believe the Patriots are committing to a back. And I say that because they took him in the first round. So they saw something in him, and now they're following through with the touches. So I think this is the guy to break that. Well, it's the Patriots. I can't own any of them. This is the guy that breaks that trend. So that to me makes James White a little bit matchup dependent on number one, is it going to be a shootout like this Chiefs game just was? And number two, is a team kind of rough against receiving backs like a Falcons might be? So I think New England's settling on Sony Michel. Listen, James White's still going to get his. He's not falling off the face of the earth. But to expect him to continue this RB1 pace is, I just don't think it's happening at all.
How far back do you think?
He's got a nice head start. You know what I mean? So I'll say he'll probably still end the season like 15-ish.
What about from here on out?
I expect like early to mid-20s from this point out. So still a startable player, but trade him for value if you can. If you have an owner in your league that you know is going to look and say, oh, he's RB7, I think you could take advantage of that guy a little bit right now. Yeah. And if not, great. He's your flex player all year. Good for you. I don't want to fall asleep on James White, but I just where he's sitting right now, I think is as high as he'll be.
I think the whole situation, obviously very different players, but I think the whole situation kind of lends itself to what we saw 3 seasons ago when LeGarrette Blount was the main guy. James White got his, especially in the passing game, but LeGarrette was there for the 1,000-yard season and what was it, like 18 rushing touchdowns?
Yeah, 18 touchdowns.
So not that I think we're going to get 18 rushing touchdowns from Michel, but we're going to see a dominant lead back getting the rushing yards, the bulk of the rushing attempts, and then we're going to see James White in passing situations. That's just what it's going to be. And it's not a shame to own either player.
You know what? I don't expect there to be a massive drop-off for James White. I think this is a situation where both of these guys are going to be really, really productive the second half of the season here. We always talk about, when the weather gets bad, and if there's been one guy that it seems like has not had any trouble passing in bad weather, it's been Tom Brady. And I get that, but at some point you have to expect that the struggle is going to come here. I mean, he's 41 years old. So when the weather starts to come into effect there in New England and some of these road games or whatever, they're going to rely more on the running game. And I think try and, keep Tom basically healthy and ready to go for the playoffs, because they always have to have that in mind in New England. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity. He's obviously a big time player in the passing game as well. So there's no reason to think that he's not still going to get like 7, maybe 8 targets a game at this point in the passing game as well. And he's always a candidate to take one to the house. He's converting them, at a high percentage, obviously, because they're mostly dump offs, but he does good things with the ball after the catch. So I think he's going to stay relevant. And I actually think he finishes the year as a top 10 back.
Wow.
I do.
I don't see any way that happens, because it kind of is similar. And, we've always said you never know what you're going to get with New England's backfield. But Sony is also a decent receiver, like a better receiver than LeGarrette Blount. So I think he can be a part of that he doesn't have to be off the field every third down. Every time it's 3rd and 5 or more, he's off the field. He can be on the field still and still be a threat. So I think Sony just completely takes over there. James White's going to get receptions. If you're in a full PPR, he's going to be still valuable, but I don't see any way he stays RB1.
All right, so just a fun one here. With all the Rams wide receiver hype coming into this season, Robert Woods currently leads the pack, due to a variety of reasons here. But he's wide receiver number 7 overall right now. Predict their order of finish among Woods, Kupp, and Cooks. Out of those 3, give me their order of finish.
I have exactly what it is now. Woods, Cooks, Kupp. Kupp is a third to me because I think he's second right now.
He's second.
Right. I think he'll fall to third because, toughness. Apparently, he came in and played through a sprained MCL on Sunday in the second half.
I wouldn't.
No. Once that sets and swells up, he's going to miss some time here. And I think Cooks hops him. But I just don't know that the way they're playing right now, that Cooks can hop Woods because he's just not the red zone threat. He's not getting the touchdowns. So it's kind of that big play guy can be a boom or bust. I'll stick by what I said preseason. I think Brandon Cooks is going to end this season around 1,100 yards and 7-ish touchdowns. It's just who he is as a player. But it looks like Woods is actually going to beat those numbers.
Yeah, I went Woods, Cooks, Cup, just because I think Cooks will jump Cup with the injuries. He's not 100% healthy, so even if he goes out there and plays, you don't know what he's going to be able to give you. So I think that'll level itself out. Right now, they're like the Woods and Cup are like 20 points ahead of Cooks and it's all end zone. Woods is in the end zone 3 times, Cup's in the end zone 5 times. They all have over 435 yards receiving. So they're all going to be pretty even that way. So, Cook seems to be only scoring on deep balls, whereas the other two are getting in, all over the field. But yeah, I think with injuries, I have Cooks jumping Cup, but Woods staying at the top.
I actually think Cooks takes over. I have Cooks, Woods, Cup, but I think Cooks and Woods stay really close the entire season.
Yeah, and I agree with the other guys where I have Woods, Cooks, and Cup. I think Robert Woods might be the best wide receiver on that team. I really do. And he kind of gets overshadowed because Brandon Cooks does some more dynamic things for your offense. But as far as just a reliable option, a guy who runs really good routes, he knows
Cooks is
your
as
offense.
Reliable as they come, man.
Yeah. Well, but I'm just saying, as far as not necessarily that he's not going to be available or anything like that. It just feels like there are more opportunities to miss with Brandon Cooks because you're going to run deeper routes. Obviously, you're going to look for bigger plays. So I think in more of that shorter intermediate stuff, it obviously converts a little bit higher. So it might be just kind of nitpicking or whatever, but to me, it's a factor.
Listen, Robert Woods was a really good college receiver coming out, and we always say that the third year is when they really take off. But that's 3 years playing for an NFL team. 2013 and 14 and 15 in Buffalo don't count. That's not an NFL team. So this is really his third year in what is a viable offense, and he's showing off.
All right, so real quickly here, give me a player and just a quick couple reasons here who's less than 50% owned right now, but you think is set or primed to have a very big second half of the season, in your opinion?
I'm going to refer to the article again that's coming out tomorrow on footballgoons.com. And my goon this week is actually my goon for the rest of the season. I think DJ Moore is starting to carve out a nice little role in the Panthers offense. He has the trust of his coaching staff, and I say that because he fumbled twice in the first half on Sunday, and they kept him out there for his normal snaps. And when asked afterwards, Ron Rivera said, that kind of stuff's going to happen. He doesn't believe in punishing players for mistakes. They need to play through them. So that's kind of bull. Every coach ever is punishing players for mistakes, especially giving the ball up twice in a half. That tells me they just really want to get him super involved. And he should have the opportunity to do that, especially starting this week against a really weak secondary. So they do have some pretty winnable games as far as fantasy goes on their schedule. They play in the NFC South. You got the Falcons, the Saints, and the Bucs in there. I mean, that he should be able to turn things around. I'm not going to sit here and say he's ending the season as a receiver one, but I'm going to put him as a big second half. He's going to be a startable player by the playoffs.
I go back up to the top of the discussion here. I'm going with Christian Kirk. He's only 41% owned, so he's kind of creeping up toward that number. But again, we're at the midway point of the season. It's an opportunity where you can kind of scoop up a guy who is probably going to consume the majority of the target share in a passing attack, even a bad passing attack or one that's, kind of taking more time to improve, because I do think that they are getting progressively better with Josh Rosen in there. And, as we said, they're developing a rapport. The volume is still volume. You're still going to have opportunities, especially for a player like Christian Kirk. If you get him the ball in space, he can make things happen. He could end up in the end zone with it. So I think that this is a guy that you need to kind of buy in on now so that you don't miss out on him over the next couple of weeks.
I'm going to go back to a player we already talked about tonight too, and he's only 12% owned as of right now. That's Albert Wilson. I said before, I think it's worth it because he's the best wide receiver on a bad wide receiver core, but that only bodes well for him at this point. He's going to continue to get targets. I at first I looked at it and I thought that it was really just a monster week, which it was. 155 and 2 is nothing to scoff at, but he's getting touches every week. He's getting 3.5 touches a week, and with his deep play ability, that's all you really need. So he had 2 other games this season with touchdowns, which is what you're looking for. He's currently in the top 25. He's actually, I'm sorry, just had it. He's actually wide receiver 18 at this point. So, to this point, he's wide receiver 18. He's he's in free agency in our league. He's 12% owned overall. That's a guy that I'm definitely taking a flyer on for the second half.
I actually said Mohamed Sanu. I got really close there. He's 49%, so I was right on the cusp of your cutoff. But he's been really solid so far this season. He plays in a high power offense that's going to score a lot of touchdowns. Like I said last week on our article, he's going to score a lot of touchdowns because there are a lot to go around, and we know that Julio Jones is not going to get those. So right now he is he's RB 30. I'm sorry, wide receiver 32. He's scoring about 10.5 points per game, and he's just been a solid producer. And in the weeks where he had low yardage, he's scored in 3 weeks. He's also had a couple 100-yard games. So I like him going forward still.
All right, it is Survivor time. So this is a favorite segment of mine, mostly because I'm still alive through 7 weeks. Both Miles and I are still alive, whereas Rocco and Deal have been hanging out since week 1. So let's talk about it here. Miles, to this point, has used the Rams, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Bengals, and the Texans. I've used the Jaguars, the Rams, the Bears, the Packers, the Saints, and the Vikings. Miles, week 7, who do you have for your Survivor pick?
Yeah, I've actually gone 2 straight iffy weeks here where I thought I was eliminated. 2 weeks ago, the Bengals chasing 17-0 at halftime. Last week, Houston was losing in the fourth quarter and ended up coming back, taking care of business. So obviously, I'm going to keep rolling the dice because why wouldn't I? I'm feeling good right now, and I'm going to take a 1-5 team at home. I'm going to take the Indianapolis Colts to win this week.
Yeah, you are.
At home against the Buffalo Bills. Andrew Luck and company simply play better at home. This year, they only have 2 home games. One of them, they're a Jack Doyle fumble away from, I think, winning the game against the Bengals week 1, driving right down their throats. And then they only lost in overtime to Houston, who's on a 3-game winning streak. So they can take care of business too. On top of that all, I do believe in the Colts. I do think they're going to shred at home. But on top of that, anytime you can bet against Nathan Peterman, you got to do it. And I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and take an opportunity with a home game to, I'm planning on going 17 weeks strong here. I'm going to have to take some teams that are missing the playoffs. I think that's the Colts this year, but I don't think they contribute to missing the playoffs this week. Take it home. Get me to 7-0, Indy.
All right. Well, I'll tell you this. I had 2 teams on deck, and I said to myself, whichever one he doesn't take, I'm probably going to go with. Just because I feel like it would be terrible if we both went down or something on the same team.
That's true.
The Colts were very appealing, but it feels too chalky. It feels look, I get it. Like, it's Nathan Peterman. It should pretty much be a win, but it feels like one of those situations where a lot of people go down. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going with the LA Chargers at home. Or no, I'm sorry, not at home. Overseas against the Titans this week. The early 9:30 a.m. It's a dangerous.
Dude, that's so dangerous. You know what?
That's
Good.
That's like 11 o'clock at night their time, the night before.
Yeah.
I don't really know how time zones work.
They stayed. I could tell.
That's like a Thursday afternoon game.
So, but here's the thing.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
After the Cleveland game, they did not go back to the West Coast. They've been staying in the East Coast. They're running practices on the East Coast. They're going to go over there, basically have the same time change as the Titans at this point. The Titans are just playing dreadful. Like they had basically their Super Bowl a couple weeks ago against the Eagles, but they're not doing a whole lot that's really good at this point. I just don't see any way the Chargers lose this game. I feel pretty confident in it, despite the London element. I'm going with the Chargers.
Yeah, I thought really hard about them, but ultimately, like, I know what you're saying. They didn't travel home, but that can also be viewed as a negative. You got 2 weeks away from home, like, and then you're traveling overseas. God only knows what's going to happen over there. I don't know. God bless you.
2 weeks not sleeping in your own bed.
Yeah, I hope they win. I hope
you understand. Philip Rivers has like 100 kids. He's probably loving it right now.
He's exhausted.
Yeah, and look, it's a business trip. That's how teams approach it. So now he could also break out the bolo tie. So he's a happy guy. All right, those are the Survivor picks here. Listen, just a really important programming note for you. We made the decision that rather than doing this on Tuesday nights, we're going to try and give you guys a jump on, the next coming week. And we're going to start airing our show live on YouTube Monday nights at 8:30. We're going to start that this week coming up. So if you are a regular listener, you watch on YouTube, first of all, we appreciate you doing that. But we're going to ask you to jump over 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday nights during Monday Night Football. So basically, we're going to add just a different element here. We're going to be previewing the upcoming week, but also kind of watching along with you for Monday Night Football. And the good part about that is that you don't have to listen to that broadcast. You can listen to the Goons instead.
That's a plus.
That's a definite plus. All right, so beginning this week, Monday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, join us live here on the YouTube channel. And then the podcast will drop basically immediately, but it'll be available for you Tuesday morning. Wednesday morning, you'll get your Goons, your Ghosts, your daily fantasy picks. And then Thursday, we'll have updated rankings for that week for you. So you have to keep it locked into footballgoons.com all week long to get yourself ready to set a fantasy lineup. All right. That's it for this week's edition of the show. Good luck to everybody in week 7. Be sure to keep up with us. Facebook.com/footballgoons. We are at Football Goons on the Twitter and our YouTube channel right here, as I mentioned earlier. We love to have interaction with everybody on social media, all those platforms. So send us your lineup questions, anything you got, and we'll be sure to hit you up on social media with our responses. We'll catch you guys next time.